Welcome, everybody, to another great episode of the Alford Sports Talk Show. I'm Alan, and today we have a wonderful guest for you. We have none other than author Rick Vaughn joining us here on the Alford Sports Talk Show. That's right. Rick is a two-time author of Tampa Spring Training Tales and also 100 Years of Baseball on St. Petersburg Waterfront. He's got two great books that he's written. He's going to share those details with us and a lot more. But first, before we get started, let's go ahead and thank our wonderful sponsor, Chef G's Florida Barbecue Sauce. So delicious and addicting, you may need a support group. Feel free to visit my great friend, Chef G's, right here in beautiful Tampa, Florida, at 301 South 22nd Street. That's right. And if you can't come down to Tampa, that's okay. Feel free to visit Chef G's right here at FLBBQSauce.com. That's right, FLBBQSauce.com. Don't forget that great sauce. So without further ado, let's bring on Rick. Let's go. All right. Welcome, everybody, to another great episode of the Alford Sports Talk Show. We're joined by a special guest, author Rick Vaughn, author of Tampa Spring Training Tales and 100 Years of Baseball on St. Petersburg Waterfront. How you doing so far today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. So yeah, we'll start right there. What gave you the passion to write these two wonderful books?
Well, you know something, it's funny that you asked that question because I was actually thinking about this today when I was on my walk. I think the person that really inspired me to do these books was one of my favorite authors who, of course, I've never met or anything, but his name's Erik Larson. And he is I always tell everybody he writes historical fiction, only it's not fiction, it's true, because he does so much research and he has so much information that he writes these stories that read like a novel, but they're not novel. They're history, but it's written in such an interesting way. He's written about 6 of them, and the most famous one is The Devil in the White City, which is, but they're all different periods of time in history. The one that's out right now, The Demon of Unrest, is a great book. I just finished it, and it's written about the period of when Lincoln was elected and to the start of the Civil War. It's only like a 6-month window, but it just tells you how we got to that war and what happened. And it's written, it's a very thick book, but it's so interesting, the detail, but not too much detail, just enough to keep it to read like a novel. So I was reading his books and I was like, I think I could do something like not even close to what he's doing, but at least something of that genre. And so I was aware that St. Pete had not done a really good job of commemorating the baseball history at Al Lang. And if you went to Orlando or if you went to Clearwater, you would see that those old spring training ballparks have been memorialized properly. Tinker Field in Orlando, there's a really cool plaza there right outside where the soccer stadium is. And Clearwater's done a great job preserving Jack Russell. And I realized that St. Pete really hadn't done anything like that with Al Lang. So I actually met with one of the city council people, tried to get them involved, and they liked the idea, and then they kind of dropped it. But by that time, I'd already started doing some research, and I thought, you know what? I think maybe I've got something for this book that is sort of inspired by Erik Larson. And I loved every second of the research. I loved every second of the writing and finding, it's spring training, so a lot of people don't focus much on it, but there's still great stories involved in spring training. And the thing with St. Pete that I really loved is it was kind of a story. It really wasn't just a bunch of anecdotes, but there was this story that really illustrated how important baseball was to the city, starting right from the very beginning when Al Lang, who was from Pittsburgh, moved down to St. Pete, loved baseball, loved the city, and he kind of married baseball and tourism. And baseball was such a driving force at an early time in the around 1920, and then it all kind of took off when the Yankees came in 1925. And then you trace it even through the Great Depression, because the Yankees were training in St. Pete, Boston was training in St. Pete, the Boston Braves. You had a lot of people with money in the city during the Great Depression. And I found at least one historian who told me that he thought that got the city out of the Depression quicker than other Florida cities was because of the money that was in the city, because of what the Yankees in Boston, those 2 of the 3 largest media markets being in town, brought to the city. Then you trace it all the way up into the civil rights. And now, Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in 1947. And I think a lot of people imagining, I wasn't alive then, but I'm imagining a lot of people thought that things were, right with the world, and especially that was not true in the South when Jim Crow laws were still very, very prevalent. And so I was reading a lot about how Black players that played in the 50s and into 1960, they couldn't even stay in the same hotel with their teammates.
Coming back here is not easy. The racism that I played here, when I played here, the difficulty of going through different places where we traveled. Fortunately, I had a manager and I had players on the team that helped me get through it. But I wouldn't wish it on anybody. People said to me today, I spoke, and they said, "You think you're a better person? You think you won when you played here in Concord?" I said, I would never want to do it again. I walked into restaurants and they would point at me and said, "The nigger can't eat here." I would go to a hotel and they say, "The nigger can't stay here." We went to Charlie Finley's country club for a welcome home dinner and they pointed me out with "He can't come in here." Finley marched the whole team out. Finally, they let me in there. He said, "We're going to go to the diner and eat hamburgers. We'll go where we're wanted." Fortunately, I had a manager and Johnny McNamara that if I couldn't eat in the place, nobody would eat. We'd get food to travel. If I couldn't stay in a hotel, they'd drive to the next hotel and find a place where I could stay. Had it not been for Raleigh Fingers, Johnny McNamara, Dave Duncan, Joe and Sharon Rudy, I slept on their couch 3-4 nights a week for about a month and a half. Finally, they were threatened that they would burn our apartment complex down unless I got out. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. The year I came here, Bull Connor was the sheriff the year before. And they took minor league baseball out of here because in 1963, the Klan murdered 4 black girls, children, in 11, 12, 14 years old at a church here and never got indicted. They were from the Klan. Life magazine did a story on them like they were being honored. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. At the same time, had it not been for my white friends, had it not been for a white manager and Rudy, Fingers, and Duncan, and Lee Myers, I would have never made it. I was too physically violent. I was ready to physically fight some. I'd have got killed here because I'd have beat someone's ass, and you'd have saw me in an oak tree somewhere.
There were a lot of other injustices. This was before the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And so I read about how the Cardinals and Bill White, who went on to become, he was the first baseman for the Cardinals. He went on to become the first African-American to do play-by-play, and he became the president of the National League. And I got to talk to him, and I was so happy that I did. And he basically kind of told me that's the way it was. And he was one of the people that was outspoken about it when he came over from the Giants. He had been training out in Arizona. There was no racial divide out west at that time like there was in the South. And when he came to play with the Cardinals in St. Pete, he was aghast at what the conditions were like. So he opened his mouth. And so the Cardinals, and specifically there right in St. Pete, started to get the ball rolling and trying to get baseball, where it should have been. And finally, because of people like him, as late as 1960, it was still not right. But like 61, starting in St. Petersburg with the Cardinals, Cardinals actually went and found a hotel. They bought a hotel and had all their players staying under one roof. And then other teams started to catch on. The Yankees actually left St. Pete to go to Fort Lauderdale, where they found a hotel that would accommodate all of their players. So St. Pete had it was slow movement, but at least it was movement in the right way in terms of Major League Baseball in spring training, finally starting to see, the unlevel playing field that was going on. And it really started in St. Pete before the Civil Rights Act. And by 1962, 1963, all of the teams in Florida had gone with integrated hotels. So I kind of felt like, that was a really kind of for baseball, it was an important step, and it happened right in St. Pete. And just, tracing the whole history, the Yankees started playing there in 1925. They left in 1961, and then the Mets came in 1962, and they didn't leave till 1987. So you had New York media in St. Pete all of those years, this huge megaphone promoting the city. And there's no question that it had a whole lot to do with the whole evolution of the city. And it was just kind of a cool story to write. And I really enjoyed the research and finding stuff that I didn't know anything about. And I thought I knew about the history down there, but I didn't.
Yeah, it's an extensive history. And for people who never visited that stadium, Al Lang, describe it to you, because it sounds like it's a place that's really special to you.
Oh my gosh. I still remember vividly my first spring training as assistant PR director for the Orioles, and we had a spring training road game to play the Mets in a night game up there. And I got off the bus. It was probably like 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. And I just was like in awe. Here's this beautiful marina and the water right over left field. And it was kind of like, for me, I love being around the water. It was like a paradise. And I just, from that moment on, I always loved it. We were only there the one time. Well, then lo and behold, who would have known, like 5 years later, the Orioles end up coming to St. Pete for spring training. And that was our home base for a few years when I was there. So I was lucky enough to be around it with the Orioles and Cal Ripken and that group. And then I end up getting the Devil Rays job in '97, and that's our spring training camp for our first 10 years. So I spent an awful lot of time around there, and I can remember just going out there on Sunday morning before an afternoon game and just sitting in the stands and spreading out all by myself and just kind of taking it all in, because it was really picturesque. The ballpark, the city, and that you could see, over your right shoulder, and then just glancing to the left is the bay. And then taking in the fact that Babe Ruth played there, Jackie Robinson played there, Ty Cobb played there, Lou Gehrig, played there, Bob Gibson pitched there. I mean, all of it's over 200 Hall of Famers played on our waterfront down there. And that was the other thing. After I was researching the book and I came up with that number, I thought, wow, I mean, I don't know how many ballparks ever have that many Hall of Famers, play on the grounds.
Yeah, and it inspired you, that the fact that you went by there to come visit, and there was no sign on the building anymore with the Tampa Bay, Rowdies now.
Yeah, that was what prompted my visit with the city council. I was down there. It was actually during COVID, and I was doing something. And when I got out of the car, I parked there at the ballpark. I looked up and I didn't see the name on the stadium. And that's what prompted me to go to the city council and say, as I mentioned, look at what Orlando's done. Look at what Kurkjian's done. We don't even have the name on the stadium. And I understand that, and I'm a Rowdies fan, and I like soccer, and I understand, they have to market their team, but I don't think it should be at the expense of, Al Lang's contribution in baseball and the city's growth is, no one's come close to doing what he's done, what he did in terms of growing that city. So I just think it's kind of an injustice that his name's not even on the park. And I've been trying to get the city to at least get a historical marker there, and I haven't had a lot of luck for whatever reason. But it's a crime right now that think of all the people that have moved in down there, in the last 10 years, and there's been no baseball there. I'm sure they have no idea that all of those Hall of Famers played right on those grounds there, in 3 different stadiums that existed there. And now the last one is Al Lang Stadium, which was built in 1977. And I just feel like they're walking past some pretty hallowed grounds, and they're not even aware of it. I just think it's another way to let people know how great our city is.
I know you're enjoying this wonderful content, but let me just take a pause and let you know about a great sponsor of ours. It's called CTC Me Mortgage. That's right. If you live anywhere here in beautiful Florida or Texas, guess what? CTC Me Mortgage can help you with your new home, getting a new home for equity, can help you with refinancing, can also help you with an apartment, and much more. My friend Curt McCrae from CTC Me Mortgage can help. Feel free to give CTC Me Mortgage a call or text at 346-527-7564. That's right. Give Curt McCrae a call or text. And if you feel more comfortable, visit ctcmemortgage.com and you can get more details there. Thank you, CTC Me Mortgage, for being an outstanding sponsor. Without further ado, let's continue with this outstanding content. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's great that you wrote the book, because it brings the fact that, even I didn't know that such players of that far back would play on that field. That's awesome.
Yeah. Like I said, 1968 was probably, was a golden year, for Major League Baseball in terms of the number. There were so many great players at that time. And I believe the number was, between the Cardinals and the Mets playing there were 28 future Hall of Famers played in one season there, which is roughly the number of Hall of Famers that have played at Tropicana Field in 20 some years. So you can see how unusual that was. I mean, you went to a game during that spring, and I wasn't here, but I'm sure there's plenty of people living here that remember, you went to a game, you had a pretty good chance of either seeing a Hall of Famer pitch or at least a Cy Young winner pitch that maybe wasn't going to get in the Hall of Fame. So the quality of play, and I know it was spring training and all, but it's still Major League Baseball, and I think it's a wonderful time to go to baseball anyway, because everybody is very much more relaxed. But I do think it's a crime that there's not a lot of attention to the history that went on there.
Yeah, I mean, definitely it's inspiring that you wrote the book and brought it to everybody's attention. And you had Tim Kurkjian, someone who's really into baseball history, write the forward. Talk about that.
Yeah, Timmy and I go back a long ways. When I started with the Orioles in 1985, and then, he was our beat writer for a number of years. And we became, pretty close over those years. And I was just assistant PR director, but the three beat writers that we had that covered that team were Tim Kurkjian, Ken Rosenthal, who's now on Fox, and Richard Justice, who went on and wrote for the Washington. He was at the Baltimore Sun. He wrote for the Washington Post and MLB.com for many years. So I had three people that are considered among the best at their craft, on that beat back then. So I was really lucky, being, kind of a novice at that point in my career, and have those guys kind of let me know and give me a great idea of the perspective from the writer's standpoint. So I was really pleased when I asked Tim if he would read it, and he did. And then he said, "What can I do to help you?" And I said, asked him if he would mind writing the forward. And I can't tell you how much that meant to me.
Yeah, that's awesome that Tim Kurkjian did that. And I got a chance to go ahead and go to the 40th annual, Legacy Awards here in Ybor. Talk about that experience and that museum.
Yeah, I really have gotten to know Arminda Mata. She's the director there, and her staff, Gina especially, have become friends, and they've been so supportive of me, and I talk to them quite often. I like the relationship that I have with them, because sometimes they'll call me and they're not sure about something, and just because I was in the game for 30 some years, I can usually get an answer for their question, or know somebody that can get the answer. And so I really enjoyed that relationship. I love how hard they're working to get, the museum on the map. It's got a ways to go, in terms of exposure, but I think they're awesome. Josh, another member of their staff, all of them are so good, and they're going to get there. And I love how much a passion Arminda has it. So, and then going to the Legacy Award, and I was happy to see you there. And sitting with Lou Piniella was a real treat. I had Lou as a manager for 3 years when I was with the Devil Rays, 2003 through 2005. And I know he's had some health issues, but he looked really good and had a really good conversation with him. And I know he's really, he's been pretty down about the fact that two times in a row now he lost the Hall of Fame selection by one vote, which is really, the odds of that are, I don't know how you could even calculate that. It's so odd that happened. But he was in good spirits, and he was happy to be there, and he spoke well. And I think it was a great thing that they named a Legacy Award after him.
Yeah, I do too. I'm glad that they did that, because, it's a great honor for him to make sure that he's remembered for his contribution here in the Tampa area. And I really hope that he makes it to the Hall of Fame. I know he is a bit down. What are your thoughts about him possibly making it to the Hall of Fame?
Well, you know what? If you just strictly look at his numbers, as a player, to me, he was a really good player, and he was a really good manager. But that doesn't tell the story about Lou, in my opinion. Lou's impact on the game was huge. Lou, there was very few things that Lou hasn't seen in this game, hasn't influenced in this game in some way. He's left his mark on this game, and I think it's an intangible, but I think it's real, and I think he definitely should be in the Hall of Fame. The game would have he changed the game some, he did. I mean, he brought a lot of color and emotion to the game because of the way he was, and I think he looks back on some of that now and might regret a little bit of it when he probably sees the videos of some of it, but his impact on the game is unmistakable, and the influence he had on other people. There's very few people. I think I was thinking about this, that I think the two people that I would most like to sit with during the game that I interacted with during my career. The first was Frank Robinson. I had Frank as a manager in Baltimore for a few years, and when he first got the job, I was like really intimidated by him. He was such a big, huge, larger than life figure in Baltimore, and he could be gruff. But we became very good friends, and there's nobody I'd rather sit and watch a game with than him because of the way he watched the game and how he was a couple steps ahead of both dugouts. And Lou was the same way. I always felt like if you were managing against Lou and you had the same amount of talent as Lou had, he's going to win more than he's going to lose. He's going to find a way to outmanage you. He's going to take a good team and he's going to make it really good. Where Lou ran into trouble here, I think, was that we weren't a good team. We were young, we were inexperienced, we had the low payroll, we didn't really have the cornerstone kind of players you need to get it done, and it was frustrating for him. We had the 1 year in 2003, his first year, where we were like 18 games under 500 in May, and we went on an unbelievable run, 30-10 over the next 40 games. And a lot of it was because we were playing light hitting teams or the National League clubs that didn't have the offense, that we were accustomed to seeing in the AL East. And I remember it was in July, right before the All-Star break, and I was sitting in Lou's office at Yankee Stadium, and he was saying, and I was saying, this is unbelievable what you've done with this club. And he's like, you know what? If we don't add a few pieces, it's not good. We're going to go right back to where we were because we're getting ready to play the Yankees and the Red Sox, the Blue Jays, and all of the powerhouse teams. And you know what? We didn't add any pieces, and he was exactly right. We ended up, in last place. And so he was really frustrated here. I don't think that was his thing. I don't think taking a young club and making it a great club was really his thing. But his thing was he'll take a good team and he'll beat you most of the time, and he can make that a great team. And I love, listening to him putting together a roster. A roster construction was all very well thought out. And like I said, I would have loved to sit with him during games, just like I got to do with Frank, because Frank became assistant general manager when I was still there. So he went to a lot of games on the road. We sat in the press box together, and it was always fun.
I know you're enjoying this wonderful content just as much as we are, but let me let you know about another one of our wonderful sponsors called Pushpin Adventures. Hey, if you need help with a destination wedding, a cruise, you need help to go travel internationally, need help going to a desert, private island, and much, much more, guess what? Pushpin Adventures can help you. That's right. Let them know that the Allen Alford Sports Talk Show referred you. Please go ahead and give Monique a call at 626-838-1006. That's right, 626-838-1006. Or you can just visit pushpinadventures.com. That's right, pushpinadventures.com. Let them know that the Allen Alford Sports Talk Show sent you. They'll take wonderful care of you. So before you go ahead and book that next trip, give them a call or visit their website. So without further ado, let's continue on with this wonderful content here at the Allen Alford Sports Talk Show. Thank you for watching. Let's go. That's an awesome experience there. And then definitely, and well, Lou is not in, Baseball Hall of Fame yet, but he's in the Tampa Baseball Hall of Fame. Talk about the Tampa Baseball Museum and the experience there.
Yeah, I think it's what better place to have a museum than Tampa, with so many of the players that have come through here from Tampa that are in the big leagues now. I mean, it really was. There's a quote that I pulled out from my second book that George Will, he described Tampa as like the Chesapeake Bay of baseball. That, in other words, that there was so much fertile crabs in Chesapeake Bay. It was akin to the fertile number of ball players that were in Tampa. So, it definitely, like I said, if any city that I can think of deserves to have a museum, it's Tampa, and it's not slowing down, anytime soon. There's some really good young players out there, and still a lot of young major league players that are in the pipeline that are going to go on to have really great careers. So I think I hope people get out to see it. It's not a huge place, but it has a lot in it. It'll take you a while to get through it, and they've done really good job of collecting, historical artifacts. And I think it's only going to get better. And I know that they are taking their act on the road. They're doing like a mobile museum, which is a great idea Arminda had. And I think that's only going to help grow it and get more recognition for it, which it definitely needs, because it's a pretty cool experience.
Yeah, it's a great museum. Definitely the Tampa Baseball Museum. They should go check it out. And, you also do a lot of volunteer work. You're the executive director of Joe Madden's, Respect 90s Foundation. Talk about that foundation and what you do there and help the community.
Yeah, I just really developed a good relationship with Joe over the years, and he and I had a good trust. And really, even after I left and he went to the Cubs, and then I left the Rays, we were still sort of joined together. People just associated me with him. And all I do is he's got so many great ideas. He just needs somebody to help him to execute them and to do, there's a lot of times I have to reel him in on stuff, where he's a little bit, over his skis on stuff, but he has such a good heart. And, I remember I was having a conversation with his agent one time, and I said, his name's Alan Nero. He's a pretty big time agent. And I said to Alan, I said, Joe looks at the same stuff we look at, but he doesn't see the same thing that we see. He sees something different. And he said to me, no, he sees 2 or 3 things different, and then that was so true. He sees a lot of different possibilities. He's befriended many people over the years. And then, our focus has been on homelessness here in Tampa Bay. So I'm involved with a number of, especially the homeless empowerment program in Clearwater. I've been involved with them pretty heavily for about 12 years, and they do great work. And I also work closely with Metropolitan Ministries, both in Tampa and Pasco County. And I really enjoy that. And I love being involved with some of the people there. It's a great, they're both have great teams, and they get great results. HEP they have a return rate. People that come in that don't return to homelessness, it's 87% among veterans and 83% with families. So they get people back on their feet, and they stay on their feet. They don't return to homelessness. So those were numbers that really drew me to HEP in the first place, and I really enjoyed my association with them as well.
Yeah, that's awesome to do volunteer work, and it sounds like you're feeding the homeless too. That's really, really noble.
Yes, that's really, it's really, in both places, it's a lot more. HEP, we bring people in. Yes, we get them 3 hot meals every day, but we also give them, instruction on job training. We have health care there for them, whether it's a dentist or doctor. We have doctors and dentists that come in and volunteer, and we provide a bed primarily for families and veterans. And then Metropolitan Ministries is the same way. They get people in the system. It isn't, we do take care of them on every front and try to get them back on their feet. And then we also try to, take care of the homeless folks too. We have a mobile unit at Metropolitan Ministries that goes out on the streets and finds people and gets them, whether it's obviously proper food and maybe clothing, but also getting them in the right direction to try to find a job. And we have many connections with that. So it's for me, it keeps me grounded. You think you're having a rough day, work in one of those places for a day or even a half a day, and you'll leave there realizing how fortunate we all are.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely honorable that you dedicate your time to that, and for such a great cause. And yeah, so how can people connect with you and follow you?
Well, I'm not much on social media. I just haven't really, other than LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to catch up with me is on LinkedIn. And if anybody's interested in buying, I happen to have the book right here. If anybody's interested in buying either one of the books, you can get them at just about any local bookstore here, and you can also get them online. And so they're pretty easy to find. If you just Google it, my name, it'll come up, and it's Rick Vaughn. Either one of the books will come up, and that's probably it. I guess I should probably get on the Twitter world. And you know what, for me though, Alan, for me it's almost therapeutic in just writing and researching the books. That keeps me with a connection to baseball, and obviously I want to sell books. I do. But it's almost secondary. For me, it's writing the book is so important to me. And then finding somebody to publish it was really rewarding. And, you know, we're selling a few books, and I do think that it's interesting stuff. The book that I wrote about Tampa is more anecdotal things. I talked to more people than I did with the first book, people who trained there and had stories about playing at Al Lopez Field. So I was able to get some pretty good stuff from people like Wade Boggs and Tino Martinez that had good stories that were, you know, pertinent to the ballpark there. And then just doing the research about Plant Field, which was the, you know, first ballpark that came along around 1914. And, you know, I uncovered a lot of things, and I tried to write the book in a style, well, again, close to my guy Eric Larson, my author, is that every sentence I put in there, I labored over every sentence. You know, I try to make every sentence a meaningful sentence that had information in there that maybe people didn't know. And I think that comes from all the years of working in PR. And one of our assignments every day for games, 162, was writing game notes. And I always told my staff, don't put anything in the game notes. Don't write one sentence in there if it doesn't get a chance to get used by the media. And that's kind of how I wrote these books. I felt like, don't put something in there that's, you know, really not that important. Try to educate them, the reader, on something in every sentence. And so I think I accomplished most of that. And I had another, you know, again, a blast finding out about stuff that I'm pretty sure a lot of people don't know. You know, like Tim Kurkjian's a great example. If Tim doesn't know about it, probably most people don't know about it. And many times when he was reading these books, he said to me, I didn't know that. So, you know, that made me feel really good.
Yeah, that's awesome that he, you know, Tim Kurkjian went ahead and did the forward. That's
He's such
remarkable.
a great guy too. Timmy's such a good person. You know, Timmy's one of the people you want to root for in life. He's got a great heart, and he's an unbelievable family man, which is hard because of the schedule he keeps during baseball season. And you know, he's still battling. He lost his brother to ALS last year, and he's really kind of taken up the torch. Visits a lot of the ballparks in his brother Matty's name, and you know, is out there trying to help with finding the money for research for a cure. You know.
Yeah, that's remarkable that you're such a good friend with him. Prayers and condolences to his brother, the passing of his brother.
Thank you.
You're welcome, and make sure, you know, people go out and get these books because they're awesome. I mean, this is, you know, let me put this up here so people can see it, and you got to make sure you get the book, both of them. That's right.
Thank
Tampa
you,
Spring
buddy.
You got to get both of them. Tampa Spring Trading Tales, Major League Memories, and you got to get the 100 Years of Baseball on St. Petersburg's Waterfront, how the game helped shape the city. And the forward for the 100 Years of Baseball is done by Tim Kurkjian. So yeah,
I think if you like, you know what, Alan, I think if you like baseball stories, I think either book you're going to like. And if you're a history person, I think you really will enjoy reading about the, you know, especially the whole thing with Tampa starting, you know, next year, because there was a few gaps. But speaking of 100 years, next year is going to be the 100th spring training that Tampa has hosted during its lifetime. And no one has done it longer. You know, no one has hosted spring training longer than Tampa. And it was a very, you know, St. Petersburg had the Yankees and the Cardinals for many years, and they had the ballpark and all. Tampa had great location for all of the teams that were training in Florida. All the scouts that came down to watch spring training, they stayed in Tampa. All the national writers stayed in Tampa. They had the great restaurants, the really good hotels. You could get to other ballparks really quick. So even though St. Pete got a lot of the attention because of the two teams, they had, you know, still to this day, the two most successful franchises in Major League history, the Cardinals and the Yankees. But Tampa had the location, and it really was when the leagues had meetings, they oftentimes had them at the Columbia Restaurant or the Spanish Park Restaurant in Tampa. So much went on about Major League Baseball during, you know, starting it really in 1913 when the Cubs came here. But many decisions were made here, and many important meetings were held in Tampa. So it played a very important role in shaping the game over the years, just as St. Pete did.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's definitely a lot of rich history. It's wonderful that you're bringing it to people's attention so they don't forget. You know, that's awesome. But we definitely appreciate you being our special guest, Rick Vaughn, author Rick Vaughn. Make sure you guys get those books. And thank you so much for being our special guest. It's been awesome, and continue success.
Thanks, Alan. Appreciate you
You-
having me on.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.